Welcome to Ripple Impact. Today we have another guest in our show, and I'm truly excited to introduce our guest, Dr. Ken Bergquist. He's the owner of Oobliq, a consulting company that serves organizations who want to keep their people upright, able, and performing well. Eliminating risks of injury and illness that results from work and how we manage work is his focus. For 3 decades, he has worked and studied what it takes to retire healthy and able, free of the common issues that plague retired persons in the Western world: diabetes, cancer, heart disease, stroke are all diseases that have a primary lifestyle component. Something about how we live makes it easy for us to become ill. From experience helping employees at work in 4 Canadian provinces, as well as several states in the Pacific Northwest of America, he focuses on healthy longevity, managing the human stress system to people's advantage. Dr. Ken, you are welcome to Ripple Impact.
That sounds awesome. It's great to be here, Abraham. I'm thrilled to have a conversation with you about this.
Yeah, it's our pleasure having you here. So how did you end up where you are with Oobliq and prevention strategies since you started out in private practice working on injured people?
It's an excellent question for me to talk about. I did for a long time have a real interest in musculoskeletal injuries and helping people stay in the workplace. I think I've always been really interested in how work affects us. You know, before I finished a degree as a doctor of chiropractic, I did about 3.5 years of a degree in psychology, and it was always amazing to me how everybody is expected to work and have an economy. But we really have just assumed that the way we've always worked is the best way to work. And as I spent my initial years taking care of patients, and it is quite heroic when you're a young practitioner to have somebody maybe bent over and injured, and they come in and you have some skills and some ideas about how to help them get better. And that feels pretty good. But something happens, and usually I'm going to say it's about the 3rd episode with any given individual, where they go back out into their life, and it could be work in a 9-to-5 job. It could be work around the home. You might be taking care of a family and doing jobs. And I was always amazed at the fact that once we get better, we really don't have the tools for people to understand how to stay better, why they got injured in the first place. In fact, there's a really interesting thing I've noted over the years. If you were to hurt yourself, Abraham, what your first response would be is to say, what did I do in the last 24 hours? I must have done something that made this happen. And we make up a story about I lifted a box, even though you may have lifted a similar box 25,000 times. And so it got really interesting for me. So I certified to become an ergonomist in 1989. And back then, ergonomics was a real buzzword. And so I helped a lot of organizations with setting up the work properly and trying to reduce musculoskeletal strain, because back pain and neck pain were a real issue. And then as the years go by, I watch and I learn. I'm a little bit of a curious person, so I read a lot of research. I like to have a better understanding of how and why things happen. But if you think about it yourself, ergonomics is still a bit of a buzzword. It's lost some of its traction in terms of where people spend their money, but that's for a good reason. Low back pain is still the most debilitating issue that we have worldwide. Doesn't matter where you are, low back pain is still the #1 cause of why people are taken out of work. And if you're taken out of work, it comes with some implications. It means, and I don't want to know what they are, but whatever your 3 favorite things are, if you've hurt your back or your neck, you suffer from some chronic injury, you can't do at least 2 of them, and probably you can't enjoy any of the things that are your favorite things in your life. So quality of life is really, really important, and it's negatively impacted by being sick. So I just continued my study, and as I learned over the first 10 years in practice, say, trying to help with ergonomic assessments and consulting, doing clinical work with patients, really it became a bit of a quandary as to why people were hurting themselves. You can be a strong person and throw your back out. There's no single risk factor. It's not just obesity. It's not just smoking. It's not just anger issues. There's a whole variety of issues that affect whether we get sick. So my curiosity led me down the road to understand better how just the normal activities of life either contribute to make us a stronger, better version of ourselves, or contribute to the wear and tear that we see. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. It makes so much sense. Besides, you know, there are a lot of things we take for granted, especially in our workspaces. I had the unfortunate incident many years back in my teen years. I was just out of high school. I picked up a first job, and in the process of that, and maybe trying to impress my employer at the time, I was supposed to pick up something from the ground, and I actually went, you know, forcefully picked it without observing the right posture. And this day, I have that impact on my lower back. So I injured my lower back, irrespective of what, you know, we did at the time. I had to see a doctor. I went through a series of heat treatment and all of that. But of course, once it comes in, it never goes, right? It's just something that you just have to keep managing. But I learned from that moment how to lift things the right way, so my knees and all of that. And sometimes even while walking in the office, depending on how you sit, if the office is not ergonomically structured, you could have wrist pain or injury, waist pain, neck pain, a lot of things individuals take for granted, a lot of companies take for granted as well. So basically, are you saying that one's lifestyle can lead to how one lives his life or her life, you know, in old age, either have a very good experience or not, depending on your lifestyle? So can your lifestyle influence how you live, you know, at your old age?
Yeah, that's your example is really quite typical, and I think most of us, by a certain life experience, have had some episode. In fact, at least 80% of us are going to have a significant back episode where we're put out of our ability, and we might be left with some residual risk factors in there for a long time. So it is worth paying attention to. And you know, when you've had an injury and you feel like, oh, I've got a weak spot in my back, there's very little in our lifestyle that helps support the actual healing of that tissue and the strengthening of that tissue. You were talking about sitting, and it's amazing to me that as we learn about why people get ill, we still have large towers. I live downtown in this city, and there are large towers filled with thousands of people who spend their day sitting. And it's been well known for decades now, really, that sitting is a poor idea. But because we're used to it, and this is where the study of the brain gets really interesting, because we have these habits we're familiar with, it really is, we're loath to change them. So most of the jobs, and many of the new jobs that are coming into the marketplace now, jobs that didn't exist when we were both young fellows, are really centered around this digital transition. Video display terminals, computers, iPads, and cell phones. So our body has been taken out, and we're primarily focusing on what we call cognitive work, where I'm looking in the computer and I'm dealing with data and information. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes very difficult to get physically fit enough, and to it's not just a fitness issue, but it's actually the negative impact of sitting. And so what goes with that in our lifestyle, and I'll just address a couple of the issues that are very clear in the research that affect us. This business of inactivity, and if I sit for 7 or 8 hours a day, the way it works out when you're trying to reduce or mitigate that risk of becoming sick, if I worked out a full hour every day in the gym, it still doesn't do enough to sort of make up for the negative impact of sitting. So those of us that have to sit all day in our jobs, we're really putting ourselves at risk. And I think there's going to be a real improvement once artificial intelligence and computers actually catch up, so that we can have meetings on the go. We can have a discussion in my glasses. I can see you while I'm walking in the river valley, and actually do myself some good, get some oxygen to my brain and be more clear thinking. That's really a better way to have a meeting, but we're just not there yet. Companies aren't there. The technology isn't quite there. And there is an important fact that's in the, you had mentioned earlier, lifting appropriately. There's a lot of posters in every workplace that I've been in that say lift with your legs. And we can start to get down on ourselves when we realize we're bending over at the waist and lifting, and we say, I lifted improperly. There's a tendency for us to save calories. Your nervous system and motor system always wants to save calories. And this comes from millions of years of struggling to get enough food. So using smaller muscles like bending at the waist is the tendency we all have, rather than using our bigger leg and posterior muscles to squat down. So most of us don't want to squat. And unfortunately, it takes an episode like yours possibly to become a reminder for you to lift a certain way that's a little bit less injured. But for me, it became more important about the internal environment. When I study work injuries, back injuries, neck injuries, and then I say, okay, what are people expiring of? Like, what are the factors that affect who gets sick and who heals and who doesn't? It comes down to some basic things, Abraham. Sleep, and everyone's heard about some of the recent research in sleep, but resting is as important as exercise, and exercise is critical just to get blood through your body and deliver oxygen. We need to have social context. We need to have food that goes in us, that serves us, that's nutritional. And what's happened in our culture, I'll speak to North America and parts of Europe, we've got lots of calories and not enough nutrition. So fast food is a very common topic for people to talk about. And sadly, it becomes a little addictive. So they might talk about fast food while they're in the lineup to get a Big Mac or something like that. So we have some really big challenges, and those challenges determine the quality of the person you see in front of you. Just like if you're going to build a retaining wall in your backyard. If I built a frame and I filled it with a little bit of concrete, and then I filled up the inner space with dirt and garbage bags from the yard, and then I just smoothed it over with a little bit of concrete, there's a very good chance you wouldn't pay me for that retaining wall. And the reason is it's weak, right? But when I put fast food in my mouth, and then I'm wondering why my body, this body, my structure is physically made out of the things I've eaten, drank, and breathed in the last year and a half or 2 years. So if I want to be a strong, healthy version of myself, the raw materials make a really big difference too. So general health and lifestyle will determine who gets better, who gets hurt, and who gets well.
So in all of this, which is more important? Having a daily exercise, resting well, and resting well, eating healthy, and practicing all of this lifestyle. Is it as important as observing some of these other maybe structure, like you talked about, like maybe at the office where you have to sit, you sit right, you get up once in a while to do some stretch and all of. So because you find out that there are so many things when you talk about, longevity and good health, there are so many things, so many people come up with. What, in your own opinion, is the most important? May not be the only thing that needs to be done, but what is the most important that an average person can begin to practice today that will guarantee to an extent that good health at the end of the day and a healthy lifestyle at old age?
Abraham, you've come up with the best question, and the simple answer for that is less simple than you wish it was. At Oobliq, we talk about just one thing, And
Okay.
some of the process we use with employees or patients is to run through a set of either questionnaires or assessments to find out where you're at on each of those areas, because each of those areas shows a really significant impact on long-term health.
Mm-hmm.
And so the number one system is your stress system. Those illnesses that I referred to earlier that we've talked about, cancer and heart disease and stroke and diabetes,
Yes.
those issues exist in the body more easily when two things exist. One is a high stress hormone and the other one is high inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people have a body that doesn't make, there's something called cytokines, or you might have a blood test you get with your doctor. C-reactive protein is one of the blood measures of inflammation in the body. And if your cytokines or your C-reactive protein is high, then for you, it really is going to be important to cut out your inflammatory foods and start moving towards a plant-based diet and really bringing the inflammation down. You're probably the person who's going to have all sorts of soft tissue inflammatory, inflammation-based injuries. And so that might be for you. So doing an assessment of yourself is really what we do at Oobliq. And for some people, anxiety and stress is the number one behavioral or lifestyle related issue they need to deal with. And we find some solutions for them as they can overcome some of the anxiety and stress related way of living. Their food choices get better, sleep improves, bowel function improves, all of your body functions calm down and work better. For some people, it may be they've been sitting, if you sit at work and you go home and sit down for dinner and then watch the news with somebody and then read for a little while sitting and then go to bed, you are really setting yourself up to be doomed for your future health. So there's no simple answer, but the best way is to do a little assessment of yourself. We call it checking your gauges. How's my sleep? Have I been eating a lot of plants? And the issue here is not anything more complicated than eat some plants because they have nutrients that your body needs to stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It just is overwhelming, the evidence that having a plant-based diet is healthier for you, and moving in that direction is going to be a really good idea for almost everyone in North America. But your social well-being, Abraham, if you gave me one thing to check, and I could measure a diet, an exercise regime, I can measure maybe a stress measure, I can do a sleep study. Mm-hmm. If the only information if I can only have one thing out of all the major lifestyle approaches, if I found out about your social connections, that's the best predictor of who's going to live past the average life, who's going to live with better health and less disease. And it's more important than smoking. It's more important than obesity for longevity, is this idea of having healthy social connections. So that may be surprising to some people, but from a scientific aspect, if you only gave me one thing, I want to know if you're connected, if you have people in your life, if you're a good friend, if you have a good friend. So there's no simple answer, sadly, except to understand yourself a little bit. Get some assessments done, really gauge yourself, and then pick one thing. Because I can wrap my head around changing one thing. I can add exercise, I can eat more plants, I can call up an old friend and make sure I keep my connection. But it's overwhelming for most of us in an already busy life to try to take on all of these things at once. So we recommend pick one thing, you'll get a great benefit out of it. And as soon as you see a benefit, then you're going to feel like looking at the next thing on your list. Does that make sense?
Wow, it's so much insightful. Looking at the way we are so busy, that's typically what majority of the people do. What you just said, setting yourself for future in terms of living a healthy life. We go to work, we're so busy, we sit at the desk, we work for so long, get back home, get into the car, we drive, or you take a bus, you sit, you get home, you have your dinner, maybe you have your bath, have your dinner, you sit down, listen to the news, or watch a movie, and you go back to bed, and you wake up the next morning, the same thing. And some people don't even have the time, especially here in North America. People don't even have weekends for themselves because they are either engaged in multiple jobs or working, hourly jobs that they want to keep jobs over the weekend as well. So all of these things, in trying to meet up your economic needs, you end up affecting your health for the future. And this is very sad because that seems to be the reality for now, right? People are trying to, to meet up with their bills, meet up with their demands and with their needs and all of that. So I like the fact that you said one thing, that one should do an assessment of his or herself and pick one area that you should focus on part-time, right? Perhaps your diet, if you're not able to have the time to do proper exercise, but at least pick up your diet. Have a good diet. Move towards a vegetarian kind of diet, right? And rather than eating junk, ensure you have a healthy diet. That could also help you, right? Then the exercise, I think the exercise is there. For instance, if someone decides to pick up exercise as one of the areas that he or she wants to improve or wants to maintain, so as to have a good health. What's the recommendation? Exercise, does it require you doing 30 minutes, 1 hour, or what's the typical or average time that needs to be put in to meet up that demand, that need?
That's an important thing to look at. If you look at the research and you're looking at exercise as being a way to prevent heart disease and chronic illness, really the biggest benefit that you're going to get is for the inactive person to just start doing something. It might be 65 or 68% of the benefit comes from taking an inactive lifestyle and putting a daily walk in. And countries differ by a few minutes, but they're recommending getting 150 minutes a week of activity. So if you go for a brisk half-hour walk 5 days a week, you're getting the bulk of your life extension benefits. Is a way to talk about that. You're reducing your risk of heart attack and stroke and types of cancer and things like that, degenerative conditions. But ultimately, you need some muscle. And so people that study how much exercise is really important, and then they look at, there's a great study that compared a couple of 66-year-old men who had the same weight. And so they both weighed 165 pounds, let's say, it's pretty close to that. And they took an MRI of their thigh muscle, which is one of the large muscles in the body. You want to have a look and say, how much muscle am I going to have when I'm 66 years old? And the person that did, we'll call it an average office job, they walked about 3,300 or 3,400 steps a day. Okay. And they really only had a few minutes a day of sort of more aggressive activity, maybe unloading groceries or lifting up laundry and doing some things like that. So that's an average office job, inactive lifestyle. And if you compared that with a person who was busy doing moderate activity for a couple of hours a day, so that person might work part-time in a yard loading building supplies, or he might be a long-distance runner with a weight program that's really committed to that, or it might be somebody who does a significant amount of movement in stacking lumber in a sawmill, for example. If you compare 3,000 steps a day, and if you have a look at the cross-section of the thigh, you'll see about half of the muscle by the time you're 66. If you compare 24 years old to 66, about half the muscle is gone and it's been replaced by fatty tissue. And that person is less able. They probably have more arthritic. If you just showed me that MRI, they probably have more arthritic conditions, joint pains, less energy. If they don't have muscle there and they have fat there, they probably have fat infiltrated in other areas, which increases inflammation. That's going to change everything from your mood to your ability. So that's a dangerous way to live, even though thousands of people are living that way today. That person, that amount of commitment it takes to maintain about 80 or 85% of your muscle mass is about 12,000 steps a day. And in that 12,000 steps, there's about 2 hours a day of moderate to intense activity, something above, we call it a 3 metabolic equivalence, but it doesn't matter. It's moderate. My heart's going. I'm using my muscles. I might be muscle achy tomorrow. An actual exercise type of activity. That's a really big commitment. And I realize what it takes to stay healthy, able and strong into your 60s and 70s and on into your 80s is a lot more physical activity than my generation or yours have been focused on. So trying to design a life where you can overcome the urgency, because Abraham, you're a busy person, I'm a busy person. It's easy for us to have the perception that we don't have time. And what we're doing there is trading for a mortgage today, our health in the future. And so if it's an economic issue, I'd ask everyone to take a look and say, if I'm going to live till 76, 81, 87 and beyond, how do I want to live? And look at the slow game. The urgency game is always there. Somebody is vying for your attention right now. There's a list of things you need to get done by 4 o'clock. And that they're like napkin dispensers. You pull one out and a spring pushes the other one to the surface. There's no end to it. So it really comes down to creating a strategy to manage your stress system so that you're making strategic decisions with your time. You're not reacting to the world as it comes to you.
Oh, absolutely. That makes tons of sense. Because if you think about it, whatever you're struggling to accumulate or to earn right now, and after accumulating the wealth, you get the house, you get the good car, you have everything. And when it is time for you to enjoy all of this at retirement, you don't have the life to enjoy it. What's sense or what's the use? So in my opinion, it's good to create a balance, right? To strike a balance between economic pursuit and your health and well-being. Starting right now. Right now should be the best time to start, not tomorrow. Because that tomorrow, you might postpone it for tomorrow again, which will never come, right? Tomorrow never comes. So they say, right now is the best time to strike a balance between having a healthy life and having the economic gains that we talk about. We need to apportion time. For exercise, we need to apportion time. For work as well, we need to also try to create a healthy balance. a healthy diet for ourselves. No matter what that means, we shouldn't just focus on fast foods and all of that. We should move towards organic food to some extent, and try to eat whatever that gives us the nutrient that we desire to get, that our body needs, because our body has its own need. Whether we give it what it needs or not, well, that's up to us. But when we give our body what it doesn't need, it will reject it. It gets in there, but it does not give back what it's supposed to give back. It does not function at the optimum capacity. So that's why it is good, because when we keep doing that, just like you fueling a car with the wrong fuel, how long are you going to do that before the car stops operating? So that's exactly what happens to the body if I have a proper understanding of what that means. Dr. Ken, this has been very insightful, and I am truly grateful that you are able to share this with us. And I believe most people out there will also have this as a warning that may have been living without, thinking about what happens in the future. It's very easy to say, I will start doing or start living healthy in the future or tomorrow. But from what you said, it takes doing it, over time for us to be able to get, to get it right. Not just when we are getting old or when we fall ill, right? That should be the preventive aspect of it, not the curative part. I think the preventive aspect is more important. It's even cheaper than when you are running against time, right? So it's very important. So Dr. Ken, with what you do, so from what you do currently, when you have a company that wants to do an assessment of their office area for the employees. How do you go about that? Do you just deal with companies, or you also deal with individuals in terms of the programs that you render and offer? And do you currently have anything ongoing that people can actually reach out to you to subscribe, for those who need advice in terms of how to create a balance between their health and economic needs, and also those that may currently be facing one of the diseases that you mentioned, and I'm sure we'll do with some advice from you. What do you have to say?
Well, it's been a really interesting year for us at Oobliq, as well as everyone else in the world. That this year we've had to make a pivot. Our history has been going on site in workplaces. A lot of our experience has been in sawmills and paper mills and larger institutions, but also recently in smaller workplaces where employers are saying, how do I help my employees stay healthy, stay at work, perform well, and enjoy their work a little bit more? So I still am in private practice in Edmonton, Alberta. That's been part of the transition because we can't go on site. And Abraham, you like being in the room with people, and our history at Oobliq is to be in the room with employees, running through. We have a series of discussions on each of these lifestyle areas that bring current research to the employees and say, hey, if you want to make it, just one thing important to you, make one change. We do assessments with employees. So for employers, we have a series of talks that we do currently in a virtual way, but we in advance send questionnaires so that people can fill out the questionnaires. It might take them half an hour or 40 minutes even to do them. We have quite a series of them just to get some sort of a sense of how they're doing in all of the different areas of their lifestyle. These are questionnaires that researchers use that have been tested to be to mean something, so that if you get a number, you can, if your stress numbers are high, you can be pretty sure you're in the higher group of people suffering from anxiety or stress. So we do some assessments for employers to send to their employees, and then we start with the discussion about the stress system and how that works, and why sometimes it seems like that guy cut me off, as opposed to saying, hey, that person made an unsafe lane change and I was able to avoid a collision. You know, it's the same event, but it's very different how we perceive it and how our physiology changes. So we start with the stress system, try to give tools to understand why we have kind of a negative approach to activities that happen to us and why they stay with us. And then we have a discussion on all of the other areas, from sleep and nutrition and social connection and exercise and ergonomics and how to do work. So a series of training is what we're doing now. I'm setting up for next year. We have an off-grid campsite in southern British Columbia in Canada. We're setting up getaways so that we have 6 RVs there, and we're going to be having health retreats for people, individuals that say, look, I don't know about this, how to eat these plants. I don't know what to eat. I eat meat and potatoes. I haven't been exercising, or I go for a walk, but I'm still putting on weight. What do I do about that? What are you talking about social connection? And I'm too stressed to hear what you say about reducing my stress. So there'll be some retreats that people can invest in and come and stay for 4 or 5 days in the camp, off grid, using a little bit of solar power. And I'll be doing talks, and there's hands-on treatment, you know, up in a tent on the side of the mountain, and the camp's by the river. And we do meditation and appreciation journals and other things that are really proven, that are simple and free, that are proven to make people better. So we're having that. That won't, of course, be until spring of 2021. So we'll have that for the individual person or the family that wants to come and stay in an RV and learn about all these things and experience what it's like. We've got 40 acres on a mountainside across the highway. We can go do it with some trails on it. We can do a little bit of exercise and show people who are new to exercise that you can get good exercise without having to go to the gym. And just really connect people with the outdoors and with a way of living for at least 4 or 5 days, so that they can experience how they sleep, how they feel in the morning, what happens to their stress, try to feel some benefits, because I'm like everybody else. If I feel a benefit, I'm a little more interested in pursuing the solutions when I get home.
Sure.
And then on-site training is starting to come back in small groups. My history has been either myself or my son, Austin, who's he has a PhD in neuroscience, and he's the one that helps me stay on track, because I love to talk, as you can tell, and he makes sure I don't editorialize in the wrong direction. So I'm pretty sure what I'm saying is pretty close to as true as we can get it. And so we work as a team, and he and I do presentations. I mean, PhD, Abraham, full-blown bow tie, the whole thing. So he and I give presentations together, and we're putting, you know, really some courses together for next year, but nobody really wants to sit at a computer and do homework. I think they really want to have an interactive discussion. So for the winter of this year, we've been doing these kind of meetings and having interactive meetings. I do run through some information because I can't help myself. I think that the scientific support for all of this is amazing, and it makes it more believable, and it makes it interesting for me, and I think it's interesting for people when they understand how their own body works naturally.
Wow, sounds quite interesting, especially the program you're planning for next year. I believe that by that time, people will be able to, you know, come together and interact again like we used to do, because it's such a period right now that people can't mingle, people can't, you know, talking about social connections, people can't have that, you know, beyond their family levels right now and all of that. So we're all looking forward to that time when people can go back to normal lives, where you can attend events, network, make contacts, interact, you know, and getting to know that also helps in having a good, you know, having a good lifestyle or health in the future. It's such a good thing to know. But at the same time, now that we just have the opportunity to interact with our families, so it means we need to have a very good and healthy relationship at home. That way we are less stressed as well. So we have to do with what we have, and it's enriching to know when you have a very good relationship at home. It helps you also, because whatever you do outside, you can go out there, have a very good social connection. By the time you get back home, if the relationship is not good at home, you come and face it, because you spend most of your time right back in the house. So it's that.
You know, you remind me of one of my favorite personal development people I would read, and he's since passed on. His name is Jim Rohn, and he talks about some things that I think are really important when I compare it with the physiology of how we stay healthy. And he talks about, you know, it's not the waves in the ocean, it's the set of the sail. And what he's talking about is that the wind is going to blow in your life, and 2020's blown lots of people all over the place. So the key isn't to just sit at home and wish there were no waves. The key is to figure out how to build some skills and put those waves to use for you. And I always think that regardless of what happens, understanding your stress system, knowing that the rest of the world is responding to you. So if you think you work with 100 stupid people, I hate to say it, but the math doesn't work out like that. You might want to look inwards and see who the problem is. And then when you figure out it might be you, then you have an opportunity to change how you deal with the world and watch how the world deals with you. So building your own skill is always the #1 recommendation I have. Sometimes it might be in stress management, sometimes in exercise, sometimes in personal relationships, whatever it is. But that gives you the power to change it. And that way you don't fall victim, or this idea of victimhood where the world is overwhelming. It's easy to be overwhelmed, and we're lucky enough to live here. We have opportunities that don't exist in the rest of the world, and I think appreciating that is the first step to becoming healthier, making better choices, and moving forward with your life with an expectation of having a long, healthy life, doing the things you want to do.
Absolutely. In one word, what's your advice for our listeners today?
appreciate
Wow.
what you do have and make it big.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ken. It's been a pleasure having you on this show, and I would also want to ask, for those that want to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you?
They can message me on Instagram at Dr.Ken Bergquist. That's my Instagram handle, and
okay.
I'll give you my email number too, because people can always send me an email if they can wait 24 to 48 hours for a response. And it's KENB@OOBLIQ.com. And this weekend, the website is going to have quite a few changes. They'll be tinkering with it this weekend to put some of these virtual products online, but it's www.oobliq.com. So you can get
Absolutely.
a hold of me. I'm open to emails or whatever direct contact you'd like.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ken. For all our viewers, if you need any assistance or you want to reach out to Ken directly, please reach out to this information he has passed. His website is via his email. You can reach out to him at any time. And truly grateful to have you, and I wish you a wonderful day today.
I appreciate the invitation and the chance to talk about some things that mean a lot to me. So thank you, Abraham.
Bye for now.
All right.